Thank you, Lauren, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for staying with us for the afternoon session of the agenda. I hear it's been a packed week, so excited to bring you the face of how interledger protocol and blockchain technologies are being applied around the world. I think this session will be unique in that we're really going to be speaking about the actual people who touch and utilize this technology to satisfy some of their daily needs. With us to do this today is David Lighton. David is the founder and CEO of SendFriend. SendFriend is a fintech company providing cheaper international remittances enabled by distributed ledger technology. SendFriend was incubated at MIT and was the winner of the MIT Media Lab Translational Innovation Alliance Award. It is one of the first global payment companies ever built from the ground up on blockchain. David was inspired to start SendFriend after his experience working for the World Bank in Haiti following the 2010 earthquake. And before I ask David his first question, I just want to say personally for us, on the product team at Ripple, it's been such a delight to work with a company that is prepared to take on the effort of starting something from scratch solely on blockchain. So it's been a really good learning lesson for us as well. So David, as we get started, tell us a bit about SendFriend. What are you focused on, and why is blockchain important to that?
Sounds good. Thank you so much, everybody, and thanks, Ginger, for the introduction. It's great to be here. So, for us, my inspiration for this really did come out of an experience I had in the developing world. After the Haiti earthquake in 2010, I was doing a lot of work on just why it was so hard to get money into the country, right? And I remember we had meetings with senior officials, and they would say, look, when we get $1 from the State Department or from the IMF, we don't have to pay a tax on it, right? But when remittance comes in from Haitians who live overseas, they have to pay 8 or sometimes up to 10 or 12% to get money into the country. And frankly, people from the central bank were complaining to us about it. And we said, even though we're members of the policy community, we don't really know what to do because these taxes originate in other countries. So this is a serious problem. And it's been described by the SDGs. There's Sustainable Development Goal number 10 on inequality, and there's actually a target on bringing the cost of remittance down to 3% by 2030. And I think we might be on our way. But for me, there was a personal aspect because I just really saw how difficult this was, and these are enormous losses we're talking about. I mean, when you get into it, if it's a $45 billion a year industry, just in consumer remittance alone, right? And those are fees. $45 billion in fees. If you talk about the flows, you're looking at more like $700 billion. And so suppose that we got that $45 billion down to 3%. That's something like $30 billion of costs saved, mostly for working people who send money home, right? So this is really meaningful stuff. It's totally non-trivial. Even though it might be an industry you haven't heard of, it has very high impact, like beyond the dollar amount for people that use these products. So, looking at the business side, $45 billion is a lot of money. And I think that there's enormous opportunity to develop products for people that save the money and that are just as commercial as they help people. So that's what kind of, attracted us to it. But
how long has SendFriend been in existence? Sorry, I forgot to mention that at the beginning.
Sure. So we've been in existence for about a year.
Okay.
And we've been operating for, maybe 8 weeks. So we're early in the cycle, but a lot of good stuff to share so far. And we're honored to have a partner like Ripple because we think that Ripple gets it. And that Ripple gets it in the sense of developing tech that works, and also the business development relationships and infrastructure required to actually launch products. It's obvious that a lot of the discussions around blockchains are very theoretical at this point, and that's sort of is what it is. It's unfortunate, but looking at what do blockchains actually do for us, it's super clear. Payments are expensive for a reason. They're not expensive just because people are greedy or money transfer companies want to steal or other, kind of far-flung ideas like that. They're expensive because there's too many hands in the pie, and because most payments are actually funded with debt if they're cross-border. So if you have a look at a company like MoneyGram and their balance sheet, or even bigger ones, a big piece of the balance sheet is debt, because they actually have to spend twice if they're going to service payments. They have to spend on liquidity in dollars, and then they need to spend on liquidity in all these foreign currencies, and they essentially wait for the customers to pay them back. So if I'm Western Union, I get up in the morning and I might say, hey, I'm gonna service about 10 million US dollars worth of Mexican peso payments today, and so I buy $10 million worth with debt, and that is really expensive. And then I wait for my customers to pay me back by the end of the day. And so what's fabulous about blockchain and what Ripple's product brings to the table is that you take out the need for that working capital, and you can source liquidity on demand, and you can depress those transaction costs by up to 75%. And so our goal is really just to pass on all of that to the customer. And what that means practically is that while Western Union might charge you 8 or 10% to service a payment, we can get it done for 2% and still distribute cash. So we're really excited about working with the blockchain to do this.
And what you mean by using that to do the instant liquidity, just to clarify, is that it's taking, let's use US dollars to Filipino pesos as the example. It's taking US dollars in the United States, transitioning those into XRP through a digital asset exchange that uses US dollars, then sending the XRP to a digital asset exchange in the Philippines, who converts in real time back to Filipino pesos for the payout. So just to clarify, what it means is that instead of Western Union putting money in the Philippines and holding funds there for instant settlement, they can just use XRP as a bridge currency between US dollars and Filipino pesos.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that's been enlightening for us is that you have users where this is a really meaningful impact on their livelihoods. And I think you've mentioned that a little bit in your intro. Mm-hmm. But could you tell us a little bit more about how does a customer actually engage with SendFriend? What's the story or their journey with you? How do they use the product, and what does it mean to them?
Sure. So for us, our view is that we're not smarter than any other remittance company. There have been a lot of remittance plays over the years that didn't end so well. And I think the reason for that is that people were trying to re-engineer the customer experience. I don't know if any of you are familiar with ABRA, which was another one in the space that, they upset a lot of regulators, and I don't think the customers like them that much either, unfortunately. But
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, don't quote me either. But I think the view is just that, give them what they already have and do it a little bit cheaper and faster. And so what we've learned from the market in not too much time is that matters. And so you might think that a new money remittance company, people would be suspicious. But I think our 10th customer sent a payment home to her mom for a knee surgery. And that's kind of unbelievable. She said, here's $3,000 of mine for my mom's knee surgery, and I'm going to give it to you because you'll get it there for less money. And luckily we were able to actually service the payment and got the money, and the surgery got done, no problem. But I think that kind of tells the whole story, is that these people need the money, and if you can do it for less, then that matters.
And you've used some really hands-on tactics in finding those customers.
Yeah.
I think, in fact, some of our folks went with you guys to one of the markets in New Jersey where Filipinos were sending money back home.
Yeah.
How have you been engaging with customers, and how's that going?
So we've really focused on building relationships in the community. We're active in New Jersey right now, and that means having boots on the ground at churches and other kind of community affairs like parades. We're tight with a lot of NGOs there that do advocacy work in the immigrant communities, and I think that strategy works because people get to know you. They know that you're sincere. And then, to be frank about it, it's expensive. So I think digital is really what will take this business and make it more commercial, because as users start to come online, you can really learn a lot more about their behavior. And I think it can be difficult to compete with the warmth of dealing with a person, at a Western Union. But to the extent that I can know much more about my customer than if they are going into a storefront, because I know what time of day they transact. I know from what room in their house practically they transact. It can be easier to buy the right ads to reach them at the right time and target and retarget.
I was asking David earlier, how do you explain interledger protocol to your users? Do they even know that when they're sending money that it's using a totally different kind of technology on the back end? Do they know?
I don't think that they know. I think we have like some press releases out there that say we use the blockchain, but we don't advertise it on our website. And I don't think that, while we're talking about really practical human use cases for blockchain, I don't think it really matters. This is a technology, and cryptocurrencies have been very productized. People view them as a product a lot of the time, but I think that's sort of obscuring the point, which is that this is infrastructure, and it's like the cloud in that sense. You don't need to know about it in order to use it, and that's great. So we don't really know if our customers care, and I don't think they do.
You'd mentioned the example of the woman who sent funds back to the Philippines for her mom's knee surgery, I think.
Yeah.
Do you see the use of digital assets in remittances as having any kind of social impact or awareness driver in places like the Philippines where they're receiving the money?
That's a good question. I think that to the extent that it frees up more cash, absolutely. But on an operational level, no. It's really the same. And I think that's a great point that you bring up. Like we're not talking about making people send cryptocurrencies to each other. Like crypto and blockchain are abstracted away from everyone. They don't ever have to touch them, and that's kind of the beauty of this approach that Ripple takes, and that we'd like to mirror a little bit. That you don't need to touch the stuff, and you don't need to handle stable coins if you're a consumer. You don't need to handle XRP. You can just handle the currencies you know and love, and have products that are a little cheaper and faster.
One of the things that has been interesting for me, I've been at Ripple for about 6 months now, is that there are a lot of similarities in bringing products to life as there are in other financial services companies. You still have many of the same value chain components and ecosystem participants that exist in payments that utilize digital assets and the protocols as they do in the more traditional space. And so, David, I was wondering if you could illuminate us a little bit on what are some of the operational components of bringing these kinds of services to life, especially in an industry that's so nascent?
Right. So look, this is hard stuff, and Ginger knows probably better than I do, or at least as well.
I'm still smiling, though.
Yeah, you're still smiling. Me too. I'm trying. Yeah. So, look, these funds flows, if you want to get money overseas, are complex. You're talking about at least 5 or 6 different legal entities touching the money before customers get it. And so, if you want to re-engineer it, you have to keep in mind that flow is built with the expectation that the person who holds the money at step 1 is going to be the same. Is always going to be the same. So if you change steps 2 and 3, you're inadvertently having an impact on steps 4 and 5 and on step 1. And I think that's a problem. So what we've done is sort of help to re-engineer this treasury, like cross-border settlement piece. But once you get the money into the foreign country, you still have to deal with cash rails. So all that means is you deal with entities that distribute cash to people. And because the systems aren't really engineered with that in mind, it is very difficult to do integrations. It can also get commercially really hairy, because the way the international remittance business is set up, people tend to do deals directly with the last link in the chain, with the last mile. And so if you start doing deals with people who come before that last mile, you'll end up getting price gouged by the last person in the chain. And so you might lose some of the cost savings that you created. So it's an uphill battle, but I think we're making a lot of progress, right?
I'll just throw out a couple of statistics about the Philippines, which has been near and dear to our collective hearts, I think, in bringing this product to life, which is about 34% of adults in the Philippines have access to a financial account. And even though 34% have access to a bank account, remittances are still 90% or more delivered in cash. So it's interesting to think about us as an industry building new kinds of technology and services that are very digital and instant and expedient, but yet still needing to deal with physical pieces of paper that get handed to people as a remittance on the end. And so as much as we're able to perfect and fine-tune that midsection of the transaction, what's on the end is still very comfortable for people when it's done in cash. And so that's a little bit about what David and I have been working on together, is trying to make sure that we can bring the benefits of XRP and the benefits of the Ripple technology all the way to the end user. And that's been some of the challenge, which is not unique to what Ripple's doing, but this has been an ongoing challenge for remittances for years.
But it's so important to do that because I'm sure everybody here is familiar with mobile wallets. Like in the U.S., we don't enjoy them to the same degree as India or China or a lot of other countries in Asia that are a decade ahead of us. But I think it's our view that, and Ripple's view and Ginger's view too, that just because mobile wallets aren't really widespread yet in countries like the Philippines doesn't mean people shouldn't have access to cheaper financial services. So it totally makes sense to integrate like blockchain rails with cash payments because it'll probably be another 5 or 10 years before Tencent and Alibaba invest enough money to make mobile wallets as big as they are in China.
We've talked a lot about the individuals who are using your products and the family members who send from the United States to the Philippines. The intent with what we've built at Ripple isn't just for person-to-person remittances, though. So, David, are you thinking about any other kinds of use cases, or what other types of potential do you see for this technology?
Right. Well, I for better or worse, I spend probably too much time on LinkedIn, and even like. Sorry if I'm using a dirty word, but I heard a Stanford professor complaining about how much he was paying PayPal to pay an e-commerce merchant. And to me, this is unbelievable because as companies like Amazon do less and less inventory, there's more demand for cross-border FX for e-commerce. So for people who log on to Amazon, they say, hey, I want to buy this product that is being inventoried in Saudi Arabia or anywhere. And so there's a seriously increasing need for cross-border e-commerce payment providers. So I think that's going to be a huge area for growth. And everybody agrees, but because banks have so much rents basically that they're protecting, it can be tough to get into that industry. But I think, look, venture fundings for these kinds of companies are increasing every year, and I think we're going to see a lot of growth in that area. And so for us specifically, that's a space we really want to focus on is getting in there and just trying to save not just remittance users money, but people buying average products online that need to do cross-currency payments.
So kind of continuing on that theme, what does success look like for SendFriend? And if you can think 3 to 5 years out, I know you're only a year in, but what do you view as success for SendFriend?
Well, we've gone, Ginger, through some pain together on trying to launch this network, but our hope is that everything that we've learned is very scalable to other markets. So once we've developed this, the operational kind of guts to do payments and also the commercial customer acquisition engine to go and tell the right story to customers, it shouldn't be that difficult to go and build new relationships and launch new markets. So I think our vision is to be a global money remittance company, to kind of ride the wave of digitization. At this time, only about 15% of global consumer payments originate online, across mobile and web. And that's staggeringly low if you think about it, right? So there's huge room for growth, and I think there's a lot of upside there. I think that reducing costs in some very specific markets, like places in Africa that might be really difficult to deal with because of money laundering risks, or as a result, the kind of low desire of U.S. banks to deal in those places, we stand to create a lot of value for customers and hopefully do well in the process. So yeah, we're really excited for the future.
Great. I wanted to do a quick time check. Ken, how much time do we have left? I wanted to leave some time for Q&A, but I have a few more questions for. Okay. Can I ask a few more questions? Okay, thanks, Ken. So this is a new business and a new area for you. I'm sure that there are things that keep you awake at night.
Yeah.
What are those things?
So, I'm not happy you asked that, but
Loud neighbor.
Yeah, like loud neighbor, totally. I think like any startup company has issues. Operations we've talked about a lot, and some of the complexity with fragility in our systems, or just making sure the payment's clear for one reason or another. But I think at the end of the day, payments is an exciting business, but it's also a very capital intensive business. You need to raise a lot of money in order to hit the kinds of unit economics that you would want. And I think that's a good thing, because these businesses do have economies of scale, whereas Uber and Lyft don't really, and WeWork definitely doesn't.
Yeah, zing, zing.
But
Don't quote him on that either,
don't quote me
okay?
on that either. But you do have to raise an awful lot of money in order to like turn a profit. And so, I'm doing my road shows to raise money. And if anyone in the audience wants to invest, let's connect, please. But that's a big deal. And then also, like, there's really only one thing that can sink a financial services business overnight, and that's compliance. So we are developing the culture appropriate, which can only be described as paranoia, right? Like you have to be paranoid every time, every day, every transaction that your customer's getting defrauded or that you're getting defrauded, and so we pay a lot of attention to that. Even having only carried like a couple hundred K in payments, we've had plenty of fraud already, and that's just normal. But as we grow, we're going to have to get insurance packages and other things to deal with these risks that are unpleasant.
So you mentioned the compliance piece. I don't think we touched on the regulatory component of what you're doing, and I just mentioned it a little bit because the Philippines is a unique country. It's a very forward-thinking regulator and a very welcoming environment for private sector to test innovations, especially around digital payments. So it's a very friendly place, which is why a lot of us start in the Philippines when we're building new fintech products. How has the regulatory environment been welcoming to you, been challenging to you? Like, how do you think about it?
Look, I mean, I think that there's kind of 4 big boy markets in the world for remittances: India, China, Philippines, and Mexico. And I think the Philippines is like by far the most forward-thinking, without question. I mean, these businesses wouldn't be possible in India or China at this point in time. So I think the Philippine regulator has done a great job by not having aggressive capital controls. They're very open-minded, and they have a good tech ecosystem. You have forward-thinking people from Indonesia and Singapore coming and buying companies or investing in companies, and that's great. And I think with regard to like digital assets specifically, I think the regulator understands that there's potential to help with financial inclusion, and that's kind of like music to everybody's ears, right?
Yeah.
And I think a debt is maybe owed to the monetary authority in Singapore for doing some of that standard setting, and that's a luxury like we don't have in the U.S. or in Europe because there's so much fear around countering the finance of terrorism. So I think Philippines is like, it's a home run.
Great. What's the thing you're most excited about?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Because I asked you the negative question, and I don't want to end on that. So, like, what are you most excited about?
So I'm most excited about getting to 20,000 customers. Hopefully that'll be soon. I think right now we're only active in New Jersey, which has been a great place to kind of test our business, but we're looking to scale.
Can you say why? A little bit more about why?
Sure. So the cross-border payments world is as you could probably imagine, like very tightly regulated, and so New Jersey was one of the easy places to get a license because you don't have to deal with very sharp-teethed financial regulators like we have in great states like California or New York, where there's the BIT license, which is really dreaded. So New Jersey was a quick turnaround for a license, only like 6 months, and they've been totally a peach to work with. But there's only about 3 or 4% of the addressable market for remittance in New Jersey, so it won't last us forever. So we're excited to hit California, Illinois, New York, and we're really hopeful that the things we've learned will scale well. And that's not always the case, but I think for consumer businesses, there's a better chance that you will. In fact, I was talking to someone who tested Lyft's marketing strategy last week, and she said that they use New Jersey as their test market too, and that basically everything they learned there was scalable. And so I thought, I really hope that's the case for us too.
Yeah, great place to start an MVP for the product for sure. Well, I see Ken with a microphone, which is always my clue to wrap it up and open it to the floor for any questions that you might have for David.
Does this one work? So I have kind of a self-serving question. I'm Matt. I work at Ripple in data. You have a bunch of academics here and a bunch of Ripplers here. As this kind of ecosystem grows, like what would you like to see from maybe both sides? Like what are you most interested in seeing?
Like how can we help him?
Yeah, sure. Like, is there anything in academia that's interesting to you on the blockchain side, and then Ripple specifically?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that growing, education is the biggest one, right? So like getting financial services people comfortable with the fact that these kinds of payments don't create like additional money laundering risks is huge. So to the extent that academia is on board with that and is educating students who will go and become professionals and regulators. I think that's a huge deal. And then on the blockchain side, helping to develop relationships with more exchanges so that we can do payments in more countries where now it's not possible. I think it's totally it's a joint venture between private business and the regulator. It can start on either side, but it's really a partnership. And I think the reason, and Ginger could tell you as well as I can, the reason that these sorts of products aren't available everywhere yet is not just because of a lack of availability of exchanges, right? You need regulators that are going to buy into.
Thank you.
Time for one more.
Hi, I have a question about informal remittances. So there's some estimates that informal remittances are about 35 to 75% of the total of formal remittances. Does SendFriend have a strategy for trying to get these customers to try a different product, and maybe one they're very unfamiliar with?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's really important because the data on consumer remittances is not that great. I think what I would say is that the more efficient that these pipes get, and the more available identity and banking, basic bank accounts are to people, the easier it will be. So I don't know that we have a specific strategy, but I think that the industry as a whole is a strategy to include those people and offer them better financial services. And just to button it up, I would bet the reason that there's so much informality is that payments are so expensive, or that if someone doesn't have great identification, or if they didn't pay their taxes last year, they don't want to be leaving a paper trail.
Thank you, David and Ginger.
Yeah, thank you so much, David.
Thank
We
you.
really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks.